Hey everybody, welcome to my NASCAR Weekly Review of Bristol. Before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and note that this week, just with the way everything was this weekend, I'm definitely going to change the format for the Cup Series, and I'm just going to go on and hit on the main points and everything that is important that happened in this race, because really it's just hard to talk about a race like that was pretty much dominated by one driver and nobody could really pass. But anyways, let's get into it. Starting off our weekend festivities with the Truck Series, which happened to be the best race of the weekend. This was due to a multitude of factors, like the fact that they did not get to practice and qualify. What made it interesting would be the fact that everyone was spread out throughout the field due to the starting lineup being mixed up with the point standings and with the finishing results of the week prior, just mixing everything up. So it was very entertaining to watch people plow through the field and figure out how good their trucks were, and ultimately Chandler Smith became the hero to everyone this weekend that did not want to see Kyle Larson get the weekend sweep, as he was able to hold off a hard-charging Larson that got in a good position. He wasn't going to win this race before that late rain caution, but ended up getting there and putting himself in the spotlight. Now, Chandler Smith did become the villain after the fact this week, but I'm not going to talk about that here. Let's just move on to the Xfinity Series. Really, there's not too much to talk about with this Xfinity race, because it once again was another straight-up ass-kicking by Kyle Larson. The one big thing to note would be that massive crash that Sheldon Creed and Brennan Poole had. It was really scary, and honestly, I don't think I really want to see anything like that at Bristol again. I'm glad that the two are okay, but I will note, why in the world did it seem this weekend that the spotters have forgotten the phrase "back it down"? Because there were a multitude of wrecks this weekend where people kind of plowed into something that was way ahead of them, even if, the driver can't see it a few turns ahead. The spotters definitely can. And if you were to listen to Brennan Poole's radio this weekend, his spotter trying to spot him through it really only told him to go down to the inside, but never told him just to flat out get off of the gas. And I feel like that would have helped prevent what happened this weekend in that race. But it was terrible either way, and I'm not going to sit here and play couch spotter or couch driver and say that there was definitely a way around that. They just ultimately ended up crashing, and it was really scary. Again, not much to talk about here. With Larson dominating, there was it was dominant for Junior Motorsports in general. The 17 is related to JRM, and all the Junior Motorsports cars were fast. I'm pretty sure they all finished in the top 10. They were all 1 point in the top 5, so they were just super fast overall, and nobody was stopping Larson. Though I will give a shout out to Dean Thompson. He looked really good this weekend in the Sam Hunt Racing 26, and he picked up a good finish that he needed after getting some bad luck in some other races. Anyways, on to the Cup Series. Now, if you're wondering why I would change the format of this week and not go over driver by driver, is simply because I feel like this race can be described in one clip.
An E minor.
Yeah, E minor, alright, yeah!
Yeah, this race was just an absolute snoozer. A far cry from any Bristol race that we've had in the past, and I really don't understand why. At this point, I don't know what the problem is with Bristol, whether it be the tires being the problem, the cars, or the racetrack, or the combination of the three. It's just not working with these next-gen cars right now. I know a lot of people pointed to the spring as being a good race last season, but that was also because the tires were just terrible. I don't think excessive tire wear is needed to have a great race at Bristol. We've seen this in the past with worse packages. I look back to the 550 package and how great Bristol could be when they had an inferior short track package, and the two Bristol races were some of the best that we've ever seen with that 550 package in 2019, because both the spring race and the fall race were good races overall. I don't really understand why or what's changed. I feel like part of it too, and this is my own opinion, I think NASCAR needs to stop putting PJ1 on racetracks. I feel like it hurts the product, and it definitely whether it helps the Cup Series, I feel like it's always hurt the Xfinity and Truck Series. I think the one thing that I didn't like about the Truck Series race this weekend was the fact it was so bottom heavy at the beginning of the race. I just don't think that should be a thing. Bristol is better when it's multi-groove, and there are cars that can make the bottom work. They don't need a substance on the bottom of the track to manufacture that. But overall, I don't know what NASCAR needs to change in order to have good Cup races there, whether it's more horsepower, whether the tire model needs to be better, or, like I said, it just might be the track. They need to stop coming up with, ways like PJ1 or resin to put on the track, or they might have to go and think about reconfiguring or repaving it, because right now, Bristol is just not where it needs to be. Now, that's not to say because Larson dominated, there are some things to highlight. First of all, I think that we should all look at Haley and Hocevar this week. That's right, the two Spire cars of the 7 and the 77, Justin Haley and Carson Hocevar, had great showings this weekend. They both ran in the top 10 in the first two stages. Hocevar looked to be maybe getting a top 5 if it wasn't for them dropping the jack too early on his pit stop where they didn't have the left rear tire on in stage 3, and that ultimately sold his day away from getting that top 5. But these two had stellar performances, and it absolutely skyrocketed them in the points. And it's just great to see Spire performing this good. And the great part about it is they're all getting really close to that playoff bubble, except for McDowell. McDowell was in the playoffs to start the year, but now he's slowly regressed and fallen back away from the bubble. So it's a little interesting to watch now. Haley and Hocevar are finally coming into their own and are on the rise in the points, while McDowell has fallen the last couple of weeks. Of course, not everyone can have good weekends, as once again, Alex Bowman has another terrible result. Luckily, he didn't drop any further in the points this week, but I will have to note, I don't understand what this team needs to do to get back on track. They had that great finish at Homestead, potentially could have won, and they have fallen off a cliff, which is weird because they're qualifying really well. It almost reminds me of a worse William Byron from years past. Remember all the last couple years before where William Byron would sit there and he would win every single pole with Chad Canals, but yet when it came race time, they would just not fall off a cliff, but they would fall to the lower side of the top 10 or not even in the top 10, in the top 15. And then you kind of just sit there and think, well, they're good at qualifying, so when are they actually going to put together a good finish? I get the same feeling with Bowman right now. It's so crazy how much they've had either just bad luck or driver errors or crew errors or whatever the case may be to put themselves in a really bad position. And if they don't clean this up, it's going to cost them. I know I gave Penske a lot of slack because they've won the past 3 titles and they've not run good until the playoffs, but it's different with Bowman because he's never really been that star driver that goes out there and wins on a week-to-week basis. So when he struggles, I feel like it has a bigger impact on his season, and they really have to turn it around now, or else there might be in trouble come playoff time. Speaking of struggles, I also wanted to mention how Front Row Motorsports had a terrible day in kind of their home track. I know the team is based in North Carolina like the rest of them, but owner Bob Jenkins is a Tennessee native, and this really is a home race for that team, and they just absolutely had a terrible day. Zane Smith was not able to continue his good momentum. Todd Gilliland had mechanical issues on top of getting lapped really early, along with Zane and Noah. All 3 of them got lapped early and just never were able to recover from being trapped multiple laps down as the race progressed, and they just were not up there. This was not up to the standard that Front Row has set the last couple of weekends. They completely struggled, missed the mark completely, and luckily they're going to get the bye week this week, or not a bye week, but the off week to reassess and go into a racetrack where they can win with Talladega. Anybody can win, but they really need to sit back and make sure that they don't have a repeat of what just happened this weekend. Finally, I think one of the biggest people to talk about that's not Kyle Larson is Ty Gibbs. People were ready to hit the panic button with how bad Ty's start to the season was. And I really never thought that was fair, because anybody can turn, a season around in a matter of a couple races. And everyone goes on bad stretches. And honestly, in this era of the playoffs, bad stretches don't matter when you win a race anyways. I know Ty still is yet to nab that first career win, but he's going to eventually, right? And he might find himself in the right place at the right time to do it. So if he gets a win, it was all going to be a wash anyways. The second thing to note, going on a bad stretch, is I would rather personally get it out of the way earlier in the season, especially with the first 5 races of the season where everyone's really harping on Ty Gibbs. That was not a very traditional start to a season. The first 3 races were 2 drafting style tracks and a road course. And everyone knows how chaotic those races can be, and it's very easy to go from running in the top 10 to finishing sub 25 in those races with how chaotic they are. So I don't think that it was fair for people to really dog on Ty Gibbs for how bad they were in those first couple of weeks of the season. And now if you look, he has skyrocketed himself up almost 10 positions or something crazy like that within the last 3 weeks of the season. At least since I've recorded videos, he shot from the 3rd page on the screen of my point standings all the way to the 2nd one, almost in the playoff hunt. So he's done a great job. It's good to see the team finally turn the corner and run with their Joe Gibbs Racing teammates. And now Ty, once again, has put himself in a position to make the playoffs and be a contender later on down the line. Finally, we got to talk about it. The main man that made this weekend very hard for anyone that wasn't a fan of him, or just anyone that was, pretty much anyone that's not a fan, just a casual. If you hate him, if you are okay with him, he dominated. He whooped everyone again. I know, again, it's one of those races where it's just hard to pass, but you ultimately have to admire being able to go out and execute and dominate and win races. While I'm still not sold on Larson being the runaway championship favorite, him getting his 2nd win on the year is pretty big, and it makes you go back and think back to, man, what if we did get that finish in Atlanta where him, Bell, and Hosfar were 3 wide and the caution flew and they gave the win to Bell because he was ahead at the line. If they had a chance to race back and Larson wins this race, he is the guy that is standing on the top of the pedestal with 3 wins on the season. Now, I'm not the person to sit here and go over what ifs and whatnot, but overall, it is just interesting to think about how much different that one race could really change people's perspective of the season, just either by Hocevar being an underdog being in, Bell 3-peating, or Larson being the top dog in the sport so far. But, again, great dominant performance, pretty much exactly what everyone thought Byron was going to do last weekend at Darlington, but executed completely well, and this time Larson probably did have the best car, unlike Byron at Darlington, where he mainly was just in the right place at the right time for 200 and some laps. But what a great win for the 5 team. I'm sure they're going to keep winning, and they are going to be a threat to the championship. I just don't want to give him the crown on being the favorite quite yet. But that pretty much wraps up my thoughts for this weekend's festivities at Bristol. I hope this format is a little bit better for everyone. I will kind of test out some things. I think this week I'm going to leave the graphics a little barren just to kind of see how that goes. In the future, I might make some different types of graphics or something to differentiate when I'm talking about teams and different drivers. I think I like this format a little bit better. It's a little bit easier on me, but overall we'll see. But anyways, I'm going to finish off and let the point standings run up in front of y'all, and I hope y'all enjoyed. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Hope to see y'all next week.